showing off Tulsi Gabbard, his own director of national intelligence. Politico is reporting on the tensions between the two, stemming in part from Gabbard's recent social media post warning about nuclear annihilation. According to Politico, quote, Trump saw the unauthorized video and became incensed, complaining to associates at the White House that she had spoken out of turn. Trump reportedly saw it as an audacious attempt to steer him toward her anti-interventionist approach to foreign policy.
It was a bizarre thing to do, obviously a bizarre thing to do, especially if you hadn't spoken with the president who appointed you and the president whose administration you work for. I mean, look at it, just seriously, John Heilman. I will say, as bizarre as that video was, it really does underline the divide, the great divide down the middle of Donald Trump's MAGA base. You know, 2003, the closest parallel, obviously, the invasion of Iraq. You had Republicans marching lockstep, not only in Congress, but also outside of Congress behind George W. Bush's decision to go into Iraq. Not so here. Talk about the divide in the MAGA base and also how that divide rose out of Donald Trump flatly opposing in the campaigns of 2016, 2020, and 24, this type of intervention and wars in the Middle East?
Well, right, Joe. I mean, first of all, if you're in a conventional administration, if you're a senior official and you want to try to influence the president's thinking, you generally don't want to leave fingerprints, right? So you have those, you go on background as a senior official or a source familiar in the New York Times. You don't put out a highly produced video with speaking straight to camera, weighing in and limiting the president.
Speaking straight to camera, basically saying if the president does this, he's going to lead us to World War III. Not a traditional move inside of any administration.
Yes, it looks more like a Democratic attack ad than it looks like a product of internal debate inside the Trump administration. So Tulsi Gabbard may be on thin ice there because Trump does not like to have him to feel like this has been boxed in by people who work for him. You are right, though. You know, what she is representing there is a point of view. It is the point of view of Tucker Carlson, the point of Marjorie Taylor Greene, the point of view of Steve Bannon, the point of view of Charlie Kirk, a lot of very powerful people in Donald Trump, particularly in the media sphere, but not wholly in the media sphere of Donald Trump's base on the MAGA right. And then you have obviously this much larger, more traditional piece, largely in the legislative branch. People like Lindsey Graham would be the poster child for those who think that the United States should get involved here. And yes, it is true that Trump has, throughout, not just on the Iraq question, but throughout, one of his proudest talking points has always been no wars. I didn't get us into any wars in my first term. I will not get us into any wars in our second term. He has been very powerful. It's a place where the MAGA base is, in fact, connected to a broader American public, which is, in fact, sick of forever wars and does feel as though the U.S. has often made giant, costly mistakes getting involved in these kinds of conflicts. But Trump is a man of absolutes, Joe, as you know. He loves to be able to say things like, we've gotten into no wars, but he also is on record for a long time saying Iran must not have a nuclear weapon, and that's where we get to this conflict. Trump normally takes an absolute position where he feels safe, that there won't be another absolutist position that he has raised that will conflict with it. Now he is being told by many that those two things are in opposition, that he's going to have to get involved actively in this war if he's going to accomplish the other absolute that he's pledged to, which is Iran not getting a nuclear weapon. Now, I know the intelligence is murky on this, but this is the kind of situation Trump hates, where two absolute promises he's made are in conflict, and I have no idea where he's going to come down. In the end, he's under a lot of pressure from both sides, though, Jonathan.
Yeah, Ned, if I flash back to March when the director of national intelligence said this, quote, the IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, then we hear from the president today. What do you make of what appears to be conflicting statements at the very least in their assessments between the president and the DNI?
Well, I don't know that we should give the personal assessment of the president of the United States much credibility here compared to what the intelligence community has said for nearly 20 years now. This is not an assessment that Tulsi Gabbard first put out in March. This is an assessment that the intelligence community has maintained since 2007, judging that in the year 2003, Iran had an active nuclear weapons program. That is to say, it was seeking to actually build a nuclear weapon, but ceased those activities in 2003. For the president to now say that the intelligence community is wrong, he is contradicting some 20 years of intelligence that has gone into that just as you said, was reaffirmed most recently by Tulsi Gabbard in March. So I think the broader question here, Anna, there are really two. What are Israel's plans, intentions, its objectives? And secondly, where does the United States stand in all of this? When Israel started this operation last Thursday, it made it sound like it was going after Iran's nuclear program, trying to defang its military. Now that may be evolving, and we've seen indications, including the news that NBC confirmed that Iran was seeking to go after the supreme leader, to suggest this might be about something bigger and even regime change in Iran. Second, and perhaps even more importantly, where does the United States stand in all of this? And Monica said this was contradictory. I think that is even putting it lightly, because President Trump has taken almost every single position imaginable on Israel's conduct in this operation. Initially, he said, don't do it. Then he called the initial effects excellent. After talking to President Putin, he called for de-escalation. He later told ABC News the United States might get involved. Last night, he ordered everyone in Tehran to evacuate. But then later he signed on to a G7 statement that called for de-escalation. So we don't know where the United States stands in this. And that's a big problem, Anna.
Yeah, there were a lot of back and forths and whiplash along the way in the past few days. Courtney, the Pentagon, we now know, is moving more assets to the Middle East. The president says Iran won't touch U.S. troops. Bring us the latest on U.S. involvement militarily at this point.
Yeah, and at the Pentagon, that's really the biggest concern, is that somehow the U.S. gets pulled into it, or we see U.S. military or personnel in the region who are injured, or even worse, as this back and forth continues between Iran and Israel. Now, the U.S., as you mentioned, is moving another carrier strike group into the region. The USS Nimitz was in Asia. I mean, it's very important to point out, they were supposed to have a port call in Vietnam, which is pretty rare and difficult to arrange, and it was canceled at the last minute so that they could move them forward to the Middle East, where they ultimately were going to be going anyway. They'd be going in to eventually swap out the USS Carl Vinson. You see it on the screen there, but now instead there's going to be an overlap of about a month or so of the two of them there in the region. Keep in mind that the last several carrier deployments to the region have basically all been extended, in some cases for months, because of ongoing tensions in the region. The Vinson is already there. As I said, there are associated ships with it, and the U.S. also has some destroyers, ballistic missile-capable destroyers in the Mediterranean. They're moving more into the region. Anna, what our viewers should take from all of these moves is this provides more U.S. military capability for defensive posture. So if, in fact, Iran is launching off a barrage of missiles or drones or whatever it is towards Israel, the U.S. can help with that defense. But they also bring a significant offensive capability if, in fact, the United States does get drawn into this in a more military, some sort of a more military fashion. Beyond that, though, aircraft carriers are often used for a show of presence, a show of strength, a show of force, and they do have that ultimately that capability to provide that. We also have heard about additional tankers.
For the past 6 months, we have been focused on the growing conflict between Israel and Iran. But the war between Russia and Ukraine is escalating once again, with Kyiv suffering its deadliest attack in months last night. As the New York Times points out, the president came into office talking a very big game on foreign policy, but so far we have seen few results. I want to bring in Julia Yaffe, founding partner and Washington correspondent for Puck News. You made this exact point. Trump said he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Putin tells him to pound sand. Trump tells Bibi, do not strike Iran. And Bibi strikes Iran anyway. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, right. He talks a big game. He doesn't deliver. And if he doesn't deliver immediately, if he doesn't get points on the board immediately, he walks away. And I think other world leaders, the ones that he most admires and looks up to and wants to be in the company of, the other strongmen, the Bibis and the Netanyahus and the Xi Jinpings, they know that he doesn't have the stomach for the long haul. He doesn't care about the details, and that if he doesn't get his way immediately, he's just going to wash his hands of it. I think they've learned also, as Gideon Rackman of the Financial Times pointed out, that TACO doesn't just apply to tariffs. It applies to foreign policy. if anything.
Taco, the phrase coined by the Financial Times, Trump always chickens out.
That's right. That's right.
I want to ask you about something else, because you don't just report on Russia, you were born there. And there's this new Atlantic reporting about how Trump's openness to Russia has actually put Putin on his back foot. And I want to share a quote where it says, Washington has robbed the Kremlin of its North Star, opposition to the United States. This is astounding to me. Does that track for you?
It does. It's written by one of my close friends. And I think he's just a genius. But yeah, I mean, you see the Russia, Putin, and regimes of this type, including the Trump regime, need some kind of enemy to rally their base, right? They need the aggression to go outward so that people blame somebody other than them. And for Russia, especially for people like Vladimir Putin, who was a child of the Cold War, it had to be the U.S., it had to be the West. Remember, as much as the Biden administration said, we don't want to get into a war with Russia, Russia didn't care about that. Putin, everybody, all of his propagandists were saying, we are in a war with the collective West.
And now they can't say that.
Well, they've gotten what they wanted. They've split the U.S. from NATO, from the EU. They've fractured NATO. They've made it increasingly, well, they didn't make it irrelevant. Trump has made it irrelevant, which is everything that Putin's ever wanted. And now Trump is basically washing his hands of Ukraine.
So what happens when the rest of the world figures out that it can live without the United States, whether as a trading partner or when it comes to something like the NATO alliance?
Well, I think this is what the America First isolationists don't really understand.
Donald Trump's cabinet, there's a civil war happening in MAGA. Some of it's quiet behind the scenes. Some of it is louder. You see Trump basically telling Tulsi, I don't care what she says, when her job is literally to report on the veracity of security claims and what's going on in the world. And whether, look, I don't think she was the right person for the job, but, let's just say, she is in the job. Trump put her there. Ergo, Trump should listen to her. It's a cabinet type appointment, one of the highest positions. She's in all the important discussions. And if he's not listening to her, what does that say? It's okay, you gave her this big, important job. There was a lot of controversy. You kind of stuck your neck out for her. And all of a sudden, because she doesn't agree with you, I don't care what she thinks. And we saw it here where, look, another unofficial member of the Trump inner circle, Tucker Carlson. We saw early in the presidency all the photos of Trump and Elon and Tucker together, some of the famous ones at the White House and, at Mar-a-Lago during the transition. Trump and Tucker were hanging out during the last election. Last summer during the election, he was at Trump's golf tournament. And now he's going against one of Trump's allies in Congress. Trump's leaning towards war with Iran. And Tucker, look, as much as I hate him, I think he's a dangerous man, sliced and diced the entire Trump Cruz rationale for conflict with Iran. It absolutely obliterated it. And so you're seeing a MAGA civil war because there are people in MAGA, guys. And look, it's not for the right reasons. It's often for racist reasons. We all we care about is preserving and building a white nationalist society. We don't care what happens in the rest of the world as long as we build that white nationalist society. But there are members of MAGA that legitimately do want to end all the foreign wars. And then there are just, neocon tricksters and hucksters. And right now, that fight is kicking off.